Section 4 of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Section 4. But they beckoned. Leaves were alive. Trees were alive. And the leaves being connected by millions of fibres within his own body, there on the seat, fanned it up and down. When the branch stretched, he, too, made that statement. The sparrows fluttering, rising and falling in jagged fountains, were part of the pattern, the white and blue, barred with black branches. Sounds made harmonies with premeditation. The spaces between them were as significant as the sounds. A child cried. Rightly far away a horn sounded. All taken together meant the birth of a new religion. "Septimus," said Risha. He started violently. People must notice. "I'm going to walk to the fountain and back," she said, for she could stand it no longer. Dr. Holmes might say there was nothing the matter. Far rather would she that he were dead. She could not sit beside him when he stared so and did not see her and made everything terrible. Sky and tree, children playing, dragging carts, blowing whistles, falling down, all were terrible. And he would not kill himself, and she could tell no one. Septimus has been working too hard. That was all she could say to her own mother. To love makes one solitary, she thought. She could tell nobody, not even Septimus now, and looking back, she saw him sitting in his shabby overcoat alone on the seat, hunched up, staring. And it was cowardly for a man to say he would kill himself, but Septimus had fought. He was brave. He was not Septimus now. She put on her lace collar. She put on her new hat, and he never noticed. And he was happy without her. Nothing could make her happy without him. Nothing. He was selfish. So men are. For he was not ill. Dr. Holmes said there was nothing the matter with him. She spread her hand before her. Look. Her wedding ring slipped. She had grown so thin. It was she who suffered, but she had nobody to tell. Far was Italy and the white houses and the room where her sisters sat making hats, and the streets crowded every evening with people walking, laughing out loud, not half alive like people here, huddled up in bath chairs looking at a few ugly flowers stuck in pots. "For you should see the Milan gardens," she said aloud. But to whom? There was nobody. Her words faded. So a rocket fades. Its sparks, having grazed their way into the night, surrender to it. Dark descends, pours over the outlines of houses and towers. Bleak hillsides soften and fall in. But though they are gone, the night is full of them. Robbed of colour, blank of windows, they exist more ponderously, give out what the frank daylight fails to transmit, the trouble and suspense of things conglomerated there in the darkness, huddled together in the darkness. Reft of the relief which dawn brings when, washing the walls white and grey, spotting each window pane, lifting the mist from the fields, showing the red-brown cows peacefully grazing, all is once more decked out to the eye, exists again. "I am alone, I am alone," she cried, by the fountain in Regent's Park, staring at the Indian and his cross, as perhaps at midnight, when all boundaries are lost, the country reverts to its ancient shape, as the Romans saw it, lying cloudy when they landed, and the hills had no names and rivers wound they knew not where. Such was her darkness. When suddenly, as if a shelf were shot forth and she stood on it, she said how she was his wife, married years ago in Milan, his wife, and would never, never tell that he was mad. Turning, the shelf fell. Down, down she dropped. For he was gone, she thought, gone as he threatened to kill himself, to throw himself under a cart. But no, there he was, still sitting alone on the seat in his shabby overcoat, his legs crossed, staring, talking aloud. Men must not cut down trees. There is a God. He noted such revelations on the backs of envelopes. Change the world. No one kills from hatred. Make it known. He wrote it down. He waited. He listened. A sparrow perched on the railing opposite chirped Septimus, Septimus. 4 or 5 times over, and went on, drawing its notes out, to sing freshly and piercingly in Greek words how there is no crime, and, joined by another sparrow, they sang in voices prolonged and piercing in Greek words, from trees in the meadow of life beyond a river where the dead walk, how there is no death. There was his hand, there the dead. White things were assembling behind the railings opposite, but he dared not look. Evans was behind the railings. "What are you saying?" said Regia suddenly, sitting down by him. Interrupted again. She was always interrupting. "Away from people. They must get away from people," he said, jumping up. "Right away, over there, where there were chairs beneath a tree, and the long slope of the park dipped like a length of green stuff with a ceiling cloth of blue and pink smoke high above, and there was a rampart of far irregular houses, hazed in smoke, the traffic hummed in a circle, and on the right, dun-coloured animals stretched long necks over the zoo palings, barking, howling. There they sat down under a tree. Look," she implored him, pointing at a little troop of boys carrying cricket stumps, and one shuffled, spun round on his heel and shuffled, as if he were acting a clown at the music hall. "Look," she implored him, for Dr. Holmes had told her to make him notice real things, go to a music hall, play cricket. That was the very game, Dr. Holmes said, a nice out-of-door game, the very game for her husband. "Look," she repeated. Look, the unseen bade him, the voice which now communicated with him who was the greatest of mankind, Septimus, lately taken from life to death, the lord who had come to renew society, who lay like a coverlet, a snow blanket smitten only by the sun, forever unwasted, suffering forever, the scapegoat, the eternal sufferer, but he did not want it, he moaned, putting from him with a wave of his hand that eternal suffering, that eternal loneliness. "Look," she repeated, for he must not talk aloud to himself out of doors. "Oh, look," she implored him. But what was there to look at? A few sheep. That was all. The way to Regent's Park Tube Station. Could they tell her the way to Regent's Park Tube Station? Maisie Johnson wanted to know. She was only up from Edinburgh 2 days ago. "Not this way, over there," Risha exclaimed, waving her aside lest she should see Septimus. Both seemed queer, Maisie Johnson thought. Everything seemed very queer. In London for the first time, come to take up a post at her uncle's in Leadenhall Street, and now walking through Regent's Park in the morning. This couple on the chairs gave her quite a turn. The young woman seeming foreign, the man looking queer, so that should she be very old, she would still remember and make it jangle again among her memories how she had walked through Regent's Park on a fine summer's morning 50 years ago. For she was only 19 and had got her way at last, to come to London, and now how queer it was. This couple she had asked the way of, and the girl started and jerked her hand, and the man, he seemed awfully odd. Quarrelling perhaps, parting forever perhaps. Something was up, she knew, and now all these people, for she returned to the broad walk, the stone basins, the prim flowers, the old men and women, invalids most of them in bath chairs, all seemed, after Edinburgh, so queer. And Maisie Johnson, as she joined that gently trudging, vaguely gazing, breeze-kissed company, squirrels perching and preening, sparrow fountains fluttering for crumbs, dogs busy with the railings, busy with each other, while the soft warm air washed over them and lent to the fixed, unsurprised gaze with which they received life something whimsical and mollified. Maisie Johnson positively felt she must cry, "Oh!" for that young man on the seat had given her quite a turn. Something was up, she knew. Horror! Horror! She wanted to cry. She had left her people. They had warned her what would happen. Why hadn't she stayed at home, she cried, twisting the knob of the iron railing. That girl, thought Mrs. Dempster, who saved crusts for the squirrels and often ate her lunch in Regent's Park, don't know a thing yet, and really it seemed to her better to be a little stout, a little slack, a little moderate in one's expectations. Percy drank. Well, better to have a son, thought Mrs. Dempster. She had had a hard time of it, and couldn't help smiling at a girl like that. You'll get married, for you're pretty enough, thought Mrs. Dempster. Get married, she thought, and then you'll know. Oh, the cooks and so on. Every man has his ways. But whether I'd have chosen quite like that if I could have known, thought Mrs. Dempster, and could not help wishing to whisper a word to Maisie Johnson, to feel on the creased pouch of her worn old face the kiss of pity. For it's been a hard life, thought Mrs. Dempster. What hadn't she given to it? Roses, figure, her feet too. She drew the nobbled lumps beneath her skirt. Roses, she thought sardonically. All trash, my dear. For really, what with eating, drinking, and mating, the bad days and good, life had been no mere matter of roses, and what was more, let me tell you, Carrie Dempster had no wish to change her lot with any woman's in Kentish Town. But, she implored, pity. Pity for the loss of roses. Pity she asked of Maisie Johnson standing by the hyacinth beds. Ah, but that aeroplane! Hadn't Mrs. Dempster always longed to see foreign parts? She had a nephew, a missionary. It soared and shot. She always went on the sea at Margate. Not out of sight of land, but she had no patience with women who were afraid of water. It swept and fell. Her stomach was in her mouth. Up again. There's a fine young feller aboard of it, Mrs. Dempster wagered, and away it went, fast and fading, away and away the aeroplane shot, soaring over Greenwich and all the masts, over the little island of grey churches, St. Paul's and the rest, till, on either side of London, fields spread out, and dark brown woods where adventurous thrushes, hopping boldly, glancing quickly, snatched the snail and tapped him on a stone, once, twice, thrice. Away and away the aeroplane shot, till it was nothing but a bright spark, an aspiration, a concentration, a symbol, so it seemed to Mr. Bentley, vigorously rolling his strip of turf at Greenwich. Of man's soul, of his determination, thought Mr. Bentley. Sweeping round the cedar tree to get outside his body, beyond his house, by means of thought, Einstein, speculation, mathematics, the Mendelian theory. Away the aeroplane shot. Then, while a seedy-looking nondescript man carrying a leather bag stood on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral and hesitated, for within was what balm, how great a welcome, how many tombs with banners waving over them, tokens of victories, not over armies, but over, he thought, that plaguy spirit of truth-seeking which leaves me at present without a situation, and more than that, the cathedral offers company, he thought, invites you to membership of a society. Great men belong to it. Martyrs have died for it. Why not enter in, he thought, put this leather bag stuffed with pamphlets before an altar, a cross, the symbol of something which has soared beyond seeking and questing and knocking of words together, and has become all spirit, disembodied, ghostly. Why not enter in, he thought, and while he hesitated, out flew the aeroplane over Ludgate Circus. It was strange. It was still. Not a sound was to be heard above the traffic. Unguided it seemed, sped of its own free will, and now curving up and up, straight up, like something mounting in ecstasy, in pure delight. Out from behind poured white smoke, looping, writing a T, an O, an F. End of section 4. Read by Hannah Dormer, London, 20th of March, 2021.